Hi, my name's John Smith with Extrahop Networks, and I want to demo for you today the Extrahop's new Solutions Architecture Citrix bundle. And I just want to talk real quickly about some of the app containers and how we can drill down. So here we have the Citrix bundle. We've applied it to the to this demo data VM that I have with some of our demo data. One of the interesting things about bundles, if you're not aware or if you haven't used Citrix, so one time one of my bosses told me if I could just put you some of your experience in a bottle, and I could use it with some of my other operations folks. At Extrahop, we can actually do better than a bottle. We can do a bundle. And if you look here, what you have is a bundle that has 21 different triggers that are basically a culmination of 15 years of supporting Citrix put into a bundle. And they accompany 5 different custom web pages, some set of triggers that I'm going to pull some metrics out with, and we'll take a look at those metrics, app containers, and a dashboard that's on its own file. So that's actually on its own presentation, I'm sorry. So we're going to cover real quickly the 2 app containers and how you get a little bit more detailed. There's another video, if you haven't seen it, you should check out the dashboard video as well. So first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and go into my application containers, and I have 2 here, one called Zen App and one called Citrix Operations. We may merge those into one, but in the current alpha bundle we have 2 of them. So let's look at Zen App first. This particular app container is centered around supporting the Citrix administrator or the Citrix architect. So what we have right away, let's take it out a little further. What we have right away is sort of a quick holistic set of metrics for you. We have the number of normal launches, 282, along with the number of slow launches, and you can drill in here and get the acceptable launches. We've set that at 30 seconds. So over 30 seconds is a slow launch, under 30 seconds is an acceptable launch. And here, if you wanted the users that had a slow launch, there you've got the users that experienced a slow launch. And we have more details. This is meant to be a high-level look for the administrator, not the support staff. That's the operations app container. Next one is CIFS errors. This will be relevant if you have complaints about slow logons, or even in some cases, roaming profiles if you want to see the errors. So things I look for here, sysvol. Right, I look for errors with sysvol, any errors bringing down the group policy objects. Here you could type profile, and we don't see that. So we just have some basic CIFS errors. CIFS in and of itself is a really chatty protocol. Don't be completely overwhelmed if you see a high number of CIFS errors. The overwhelming majority of them are actually quite benign. The next one are DNS errors, and this is all of these metrics are from the point of view of Citrix, right? So the way this works is we create triggers. We assign them to the Citrix device group. That's been covered in other videos. And then everything you see here, all of these response errors are response errors from a Citrix server, right? So here we have a response error, and we get the query that they actually queried, the server, the DNS server, and then the client, in this case the Zen App server or the Zen Desktop server. We also have another metric for DNS timeouts. So this is also can be, especially if it's an application server that's timing out, you definitely want to know that. And I've seen environments where DNS is really, really bad. The next one is the active user count. Sorry, let me just make this a little bigger. Next one is the active user count. And so I don't have a drill down for this, but this is just your active users. So these are users that are sending data on the wire. This may differ from what you see in the console, or if you have a PowerShell script. We are interrogating the wire. Your PowerShell scripts, the Citrix console, will interrogate the actual workstations themselves. We are monitoring only those active users, so if they're talking on the network, we're able to monitor them. The next one are your launch metrics, and these are a little bit more detailed. So we have launch and login, and I'll explain what both of those are real quick. So a launch is when you click the icon in the web interface or storefront server, the time it takes for the app to actually be presented for you and you to interact with it. The login is the Active Directory or the authentication portion of that. So we separate those two, and the reason I do that, I had a situation at one of my other jobs where we were having where we were experiencing 3-minute logins. So a long launch time that's accompanied with a long login time, I generally troubleshoot Active Directory and DNS. I take a look and find out, are they having trouble finding a DNS server? Are they having any issues with, is sites and services not set up? That type of thing. If you have a long launch and a short login, that can be an indication of something with the profile. Let's say you have roaming profiles that have to copy over, and so those are some of the things that can impact that. So we separate those two for that reason, because both are very different. So if we click in here, we actually have a myriad of metrics. So we have a launch time by subnet. We do this because sometimes organizational units will be represented by a subnet, right? A MPLS subnet somewhere. And so there could be something. I've had instances where, a login script was mapping a drive letter on a DFS head that had been removed or upgraded and was no longer there. So, the logon script is pining for this drive letter that's not there anymore. And so this can manifest itself as a long login for a particular network ID. You may say, hey, these are all in the marketing OU. Did someone change a logon script? Just kind of gives you an idea of where you can maybe guess at where the problem is. The next one is the launch time by app. So these are all of the different applications and their launch time. Then we have the launch time by server. This is very important. You may have a particular server that just doesn't have it together, especially if you have 200, 300, and in some cases 500 servers. We've only got 5 because this is demo data. Obviously, we can't use customer data with our recording, so we're somewhat limited. The next one is the launch by server. Again, keep in mind OUs, that type of thing. Maybe this user has some policies that are impacting this. Then we get into login by subnet. And of course, login by user. So here we see Kemp has an 85-second login. And the launch is probably something just north of 85 seconds, 88 seconds. So here I would look at the Active Directory infrastructure for the user Kemp to see why this is taking so long to log in. That would be my first place to look. Make sure sites and services is set up, that type of thing. The next one is the XML Broker Performance. Again, this is our lab, so this is a couple of red flags here. First off, every single server shouldn't be an XML broker. That can be problematic. So you don't necessarily want to see every single server as an XML broker. You should only see a couple, and you generally want to see this be in the single digits or double digits. 3 digits is a little bit out of whack. I prefer not to see that. So if you see things like 300, 400, 500 milliseconds here, it's a problem. You either have something wrong with Active Directory, you might have something wrong with the server that's actually doing the XML brokering, but this is sort of a canary in the coal mine, if you will, of the overall health. The XML broker, of course, takes your credentials and hands them off to Active Directory. It needs to find a domain controller. So this is some of the stuff that you want to look for, and make sure that your XML brokers are generally in that two-digit area. Here we have a dip here. That could have been an outage. It's actually late at night, but here's kind of where you see a dip. Next is DNS Performance. And so here, these are the DNS server performance. So this is the server performance of every single DNS server that you have. And here we have the DNS client performance. So if you're getting slowness complaints, DNS in DNS few people realize how much DNS can wreck your client server environment. So it's important to keep track of the DNS performance and how well it's doing. In the past, when you had to maintain DNS in the old days where you ran DNS on Unix on bind, you had forward and lookups and everything was kind of maintained. In the new, in 2000, when DNS became a checkbox and it just worked, well, what we found out once we started looking at the wire is that DNS didn't just work. Things like excessive DNS suffixes can cause a lot of failures. The next one is the LDAP think time and client time. So the think time is kind of the amount of time that the client is spending, I think, looking for a domain controller to authenticate to. So this can spike, and I've been able to associate this high think time with really long logon times. And so here, this is the client and this is the server. And then we also provide the LDAP processing time. So again, this is the amount of time. So the LDAP servers look good. I think this think time, I would say maybe sites and services isn't configured. It's taking 3 seconds, almost 4 seconds, just to find a domain controller. So that's something to be concerned about. The next one is a breakdown of the Citrix clients. Again, we only have a small demo lab, so you have kind of just a small number of clients. If this can be valuable if there's a big vulnerability. We can map those client versions out. So if you need to make a Microsoft System Center job to upgrade all of the clients, we can map the client version by subnet for you, that type of stuff, just like we did, just like we do with the latency on the dashboards, and we'll cover it in the latency here. But we can give you quite a bit of information. So here we have the user and the actual workstation. Again, this is in the lab, the workstation that they were on. So if you had to patch a set of clients, we'd be able to give you that visibility right away. The next part of the app container is the latency metrics. And what we've done here, if you've watched the dashboard video, you've probably heard me talk about this a little bit, but this is mainly for drilling down. So here we have the list of subnets. Again, most organizations will geospatially organize their enterprise or organize their networks by subnet ID. And what you look here, you see everything looks good, and then you have this one that's nearly a full second, right? So you know right away, let's say maybe this is an MPLS cloud, and you have an SLA with that local exchange carrier, and you need to call the LEC and talk to them about the performance of it. Could be one single user that has bad latency. This could be your wireless network. So these are just some of the things that you want to keep track of. And it's nice to see that holistic view. Sometimes I've had an instance where a switch had overheated in a closet, and all of the latency complaints were finally coming from, one particular part of my network. This would have that would have taken what took me 6 hours to run down. I was able to run it down here in just a couple of seconds. And we can also alert on this, right? If you have a particular subnet that's over 300 milliseconds, we can actually build in an alert so that you're warned about a subnet that's too slow. Here we have the users with high latency. So I've come to learn that the 300 millisecond threshold is when users start to see the type ahead delays, and they start to call the help desk and complain. So here we're able to map the users. Here we've got the user. We have their client IP, so we know where they're coming from. And actually they're from that 252 network, as you can see. And we have the server. So an individual server could have a chatty NIC or something, so we kind of included that information as well. And this is all customizable. We can customize it to whatever your environment is. But if you look here, we see the users and everyone who traversed the 300 millisecond threshold that day. Then if we go down, we have the next one, the user's overall latency. So if we go back out and we see, let's look at a user that had high latency, sorry. Let's check this user here, RORAB, and I'm gonna go and look. So we know that user traversed the 300 millisecond threshold. I'm gonna come here and see what their overall latency was. So if you look here, we had earlier the user was in this high latency. He or she was in this high latency. It had traversed the 300 millisecond threshold, but their overall latency for that day was actually quite good. So this is a scenario where they wander too far away from a wireless access point. They're in a coffee shop, that has varying performance, or they just have trouble with their home network, or their kids downloading, movies off BitTorrent. So who knows, right? But any number of these things can end up in the lap of a Citrix administrator. So this is the goal here is to provide you with the ability to troubleshoot that and have visibility into it. And then lastly, we have the client IP, and we'll include the server IP as well. But here's the client IPs and the latency by client IP. The next app container I want to talk about is Citrix Operations, and we've got a custom page for it. And again, we have limited demo data, but I just want to show you some of this. The idea behind this was that we would empower maybe the first responders. One of the things I noticed at one of my former employers was that we had a team of 5 people supporting 15,000 Citrix users, and we realized that the first responders, the people on the help desk, needed to be smarter for us to pull it off. And so we built some tools, and it took us a long time. Here we've basically put together just some quick ways for the first responders to be able to see some information. So we have closed sessions, open sessions, user database errors, and then slow launches. So if you get a complaint from a user that says, hey, I'm having some trouble with my Citrix environment, it's really slow. First thing we have here is the user latency. So they can click here, and let's say their user ID is Alex M. We see that Alex M has a latency of over 300 milliseconds on the server line. I can now type the server line, and I can say, yes, your latency is high, but while your latency is 300 milliseconds, we have a large number of users that don't have any high latency at all. In fact, their latency all looks great. A lot of times with a Citrix engineer, you'll get a complaint about slow performance. The user has high latency. This sort of lets you say, hey, yes, your latency is high, but everyone else on the server has an acceptable latency. No, we're not going to come to your house and fix your wireless network. This is something that constantly plagues teleworkers in problematic ISPs, and it's always a Citrix problem. Well, now you're able to go in here and see the performance of every single, or at least the latency of every single user on that server. And you see that, and this is in real time. It'll update every 30 seconds. So another scenario, closed sessions. Let's say somebody calls and said, my session was terrible. When were you logged on? 6 hours ago. Well, let's take a look at the closed session. So here within this, I have the user, I have the application that they ran, I have the server that they were running on, I have their client IP and their client name. I have if they had any retransmission timeouts or whatever their round trip time was, maybe they had high latency. And I also get their client type. Now for me, in my environment, when I had over 300 servers, if somebody would have just included this information here in the escalation, it would have saved me between 6 and 8 hours a week of just trying to root out where the user was logged in. And I know that there's some other tools, but this puts it right in the hands of the person answering the phone. They can paste this information into the escalation, and you have a little bit more information and maybe save yourself a little bit of time. The next thing I want to show here, we have open sessions. So if someone calls up and says, hey, my session is really slow, they can go in here, or I'm having whatever trouble, and you want to know what they're logged in right at that moment, they can copy this and include that in the escalation message. I am the Citrix admin if you're one of the help desk people. The idea here is to empower the help desk and the Citrix folks to be able to kind of hunt down where the problems are. The next one is database errors, and I'm limited with the demo data here, but let's say I'm running a web-based app and I'm running a client-server app, right? And there's a client with a back-end database. Someone's going to call the service desk or the help desk, and they're going to hear the word Citrix, and then you're going to do the database team's troubleshooting for them. So here, one of the things I wanted to highlight is our ability not only to see the ICA channel and the infrastructure around your Citrix environment, but also the ability to kind of troubleshoot the downstream performance of the applications that you will inevitably be held accountable for. So here we're taking a look at the Citrix database errors. So let's say this is an important enterprise application, and here we see in most cases we can get the user, we have the client IP that they came from, what the error was, and information about the error. This could actually be escalated as something that's a database errors, and maybe for once escalated to another team other than the Citrix team. One of the challenges and one of the reasons these tickets get so expensive is that there's no level 2 person to come help them, right? It goes from the person answering the phone, and then it gets immediately escalated to what is in most cases a 6-figure resource. And so this gets escalated to level 3, and now it becomes a really expensive ticket. So getting as much information as possible is really important. Excuse me. Sorry. So we're basically covering the database errors here. If I had some web traffic, I'd be able to show you that as well, and you'd be able to see, let's say you had a slow web page. And again, all of this is the world according to Citrix. The next thing you might want to take a look at, or that could be valuable, is the ICA channel. And this should be, this is also in real time. So you can come in here and type printer, and you'll see everyone's printer footprint, right? You can come here and type, audio, and you'll see everyone's audio, right? So if someone is watching a movie, right, and this happens sometimes with offshore where Spotify is blocked or YouTube is blocked because bandwidth is really expensive there, so they'll try to use, your Zen desktop session to kind of to consume some of those sites like Spotify, Pandora, whatever. So that'll show up in the audio channel, right? And also I had an instance earlier in my career. Sorry, here we go. Earlier in my career, I supported some SaaS developers who would, copy these gigantic 5 and 6 gig data sets through the ICA channel. We actually called it FTP over ICA. And I would have been able to catch them here, right? Or if somebody steals an ISO, or takes intellectual property, you'll be able to see that here. So this is a really quick way to take a look at the Citrix ICA channel and kind of see what's going on with that session, especially things like audio and Zen App. Audio can really adversely affect the experience for everyone else on that server. So here we have the user, we have the server that's affected, and we have the channel. Likewise, we have a user Extrahop. If I want to see everything Extrahop did, I can type Extrahop, and I have all of their ICA channel information and everything that they did on the ICA channel. So anyway, I hope this was valuable. Please, if you are looking at an edge site replacement, or if you're looking at just trying to get a better holistic visibility in real-time help for monitoring your Citrix environment, please give us a shout, and we'd be happy to work with you. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.